Okay, we got the Stories 3 demo last night, and it is incredible. I've been having so much fun playing with it. This game is going to be so good. I cannot wait for March 12th. This is going to be such an incredible game, and I wanted to make a very quick video about things that I really enjoy about it, and then maybe I'll make a more in-depth one later. But right off the bat, I am so intrigued in the story. I am so invested in it. My face literally dropped when I saw the to be continued screen after I finished the demo, because I was just so invested in it. I did not want it to end. I think the storyline is going to be so good. It's so interesting, and I can't wait to play the full entire game. And I assume we're going to get some multiplayer like stuff when the actual game releases, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of end game content, because all Stories games so far have had a lot of end game stuff to do. So I'm looking forward to that a lot. And yeah, it's just the story was so interesting. And I mean, Stories 2 was pretty interesting also, but not to the level that Stories 3 has been. And I'm very excited to see where the story goes. The gameplay plays pretty much how you'd expect a Stories game to play if you're a day one fan of Stories like I am. It plays pretty much the exact same. You've got your power, technical, and speed attacks, and it's like a rock, paper, scissors game, kind of like a weapon triangle from Fire Emblem. There are some key differences though, one of those being that your skills no longer take up your kinship gauge. They now have a separate stamina gauge. So now instead of just having an HP gauge, we also have like an HP MP gauge that you would find in a lot of turn-based RPGs, and I really do like that. I think that is going to make the game very interesting, and it makes it so you can't really just like spam skills just over and over and over and over. So I think that's going to be very interesting to see how that works. And there's also some differences, which I really like this as well. Stories 1 had no attack patterns at all, even though Naviru would say like, hey, you need to study the monster's attack patterns, or oh, it's mad, the attack patterns are going to change. Stories 1 was complete luck of the draw and rock, paper, scissors, and I made the game tough in the early mid-game up until you got to be able to use Deadly Horn Jab, or I think it's called Vital Stab in Stories 1, but it made that game very, very difficult to play just because of that, like 100% luck-based. Now, they did have some attacks that they would use more than others, yes, but then Stories 2 made it so that all monsters have a very set pattern. Like, they do one thing and then they do the next thing. They will always do this type of attack when you first start the battle. When they're mad, they'll do this. Very clear-cut path of what the monsters did in Stories 2. And while I liked that change, it did make the monsters feel a little easier. Like, there was not a lot of difficulty in the game, save a few exceptions. But for the most part, pretty much every single monster was like, this is what it does next, this is how you can count, whatever. Like, I have a very detailed spreadsheet of Stories 2 that if you've seen my tier list video, then you know it's a pretty detailed tier list, or a pretty detailed spreadsheet rather. But Stories 3 kind of mixes that up, and it kind of puts the two together, so they do have a set pattern. And from what I can tell, the monsters that have been in Stories 2 that are back in Stories 3, they have the same patterns as they did in Stories 2, which is nice because I don't really have to change my spreadsheet that much. But they also have this really cool mechanic where the monsters can use skills that they don't trigger a head-to-head, but they can still target a specific monster, and there is a graphical thing that you can differentiate between the two. But I think that that's very cool, because I think that skills are going to become very interesting and very different the way that they are right now, and I'm very excited to see where that goes. It's a really good change, and I think it makes the battles a lot more interesting, and I've been loving the gameplay so far. I do miss Sword and Shield. They did replace Sword and Shield with Longsword. The other 5 weapons are the same, but I do kind of miss Sword and Shield. Longsword seems very interesting. I haven't been able to really figure it out much. I've been playing around with it a lot, trying to get it so I can understand it, but I'm still working on that part. But it seems like a very interesting weapon right now. Stories 3 also brought back one of my favorite mechanics that Stories 1 had and Stories 2 took away from us, and that is element changing monsties. It doesn't work the same way as it does in Stories 1, because in Stories 1 you just had to fill your bingo card and write a channeling with whatever element you wanted the most of. Stories 3, you have to do the habit restoration, and I do like this a little bit more than Stories 1, because I like the idea that you have to go find your rare element changed Monstie rather than just making it element change. So I do like that change, and thank goodness they brought back the color changing, because that was one of the coolest things the Stories 1 had. I'm very excited to see where this is going. This is going to make the tier list a little bit more difficult to talk about, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. I don't really want to talk about that, but just the overall feel of how the game works and how the Monsties work now is very, very fun and intriguing. And I can't say enough how excited I am for this game to come out. They do have more field skills, which I think is very interesting. I think that some monsters are better than others in certain fields for the field skills, because there's, I think, 8 or 9 field skills, and each monster can have 4 or 5 of them. And so I think that certain monsters do better than others at certain field skills, but it is interesting that you can have that many now. The demo is also very difficult because you can only get your Monsties to a max level of 10. And I think that maybe it might even be level locked to area, because you can get monsters up to level 10 incredibly fast. I got all my monsters to level 10 within the first like 3 minutes of being outside, because you get EXP from gathering. And so there might even be level locks to areas, which I don't think I would like that very much. Or else the level XP is going to just take off like a rocket once you get past like level 10 or something. Either way, it's interesting. It does make the demo kind of difficult, because a lot of the monsters do a lot of damage and you do not do any damage. So it is kind of hard to beat the demo and just to play it in general, but it's still so much fun. You just kind of gotta watch out for what you can and can't beat. It's pretty easily decided what you can and can't beat. Like you know, after like taking the first hit or dealing the first hit, you just know, you're like, okay, I can't take this, so I'm gonna peace out of this. The map is gorgeous. This is only the first area, and the map is huge and it's beautiful to look at. And I could look at this area forever. It is such a gorgeous place. There's so much to roam around in. There are tons of side quests and side missions for you to be able to do, and I'm very happy about that, because it makes it so you can do more things in the demo. And, you know, you can transfer your save data from your demo into the actual game when it releases, and so you won't have to, like, redo all of this over again. I mean, you could if you want to, because the game is just going to be that good. But I do like that aspect of it a lot. There's so much to do in this map, and, you know, it looks huge, but you can actually traverse it pretty quick. Like a Toby Kadachi, for example, can zip around a map very fast. And I've seen some people talk about how the flying mechanic is really dumb right now, but there was an NPC dialogue at one point that said that you need to take place in flight training, and so I would imagine that you unlock actual flight later on in the game, just like how in Stories 1 and 2 you don't unlock flight until you get Ratha, you know, completely ready to go. So that's interesting. I'm not really that worried about the flying mechanic, and even if it's not gonna be like the OG in Stories 2 flying, really I don't think it's gonna be that big of a deal, because I mean, it's a nice quality of life, but it's not something that was absolutely game breaking if I didn't have it, you know, because you can't even fly in the dens in Stories 2 anyway, so it's like it really didn't change that much. So because the majority of the end game is in the, you know, the ticket dens, and so if Stories 3 is going to be anything like that, I don't think that flying is really going to be that big of a problem. But yeah, moral of the story though, this map is just so incredible. Lastly, I wanted to talk briefly about the tier list. The tier list is going to be kind of difficult to do. I still want to do one for Stories 3 when it comes out. The biggest problem I have with it is I don't know how exactly I'm going to do it, because element changing is back, and it changes a lot of things. It changes resistances, it changes element attacks. So I think what I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna have to base my tier list off of the Monstie's general stats and what the kinship skills do. If you remember in my Den tier list video, I haven't made my arena one for Stories 2, but my Den tier list one, I had 5 criterias, and I honestly forgot what all 5 were outside of stats and elements. There's going to be a lot more difficulty trying to make a tier list for Stories 3, but it's a challenge I'm willing to take, and I'm going to do it, and it's going to be great. Overall, I had so much fun with Stories 3. It's going to be such a great game. There's at least 3 new monsters that you can find in the demo, and we know about only one of them, actually. So if you don't want spoilers, you can skip a little bit ahead. But that was Green Plesioth that we got. We've also gotten Chatacabra, which I kind of figured we would get after it showed up in one of the first trailers. And then we also have Namielle, which is so cool because Namielle was missing from Stories 2, and I will die on this hill. That is why water monsters were so bad in Stories 2, is because we did not have Namielle. So very, very cool to see Namielle in this game. Super excited to see if we can get a Monstie. I assume we can, just like we can with Malzeno, because we saw that in a trailer. At the end cutscene of the demo, too, there was a Somnicanth that was shown very briefly. So I imagine we'll be able to get that as well. And then we know about Magnamalo, we know about Arkfeld, we know about Raydao, and there are some interesting ones that I wanted to talk about super fast within the store page, because there are some monster hairstyles that I think are a little telling to what we can expect to see. First and foremost, we have Arkfeld, which we already knew about Arkfeld. That wasn't anything too surprising, so it's not surprising that we would be able to see that as a Monstie. I think there's a video out there where there's a kinship skill. I haven't watched it because I kind of want to go with minimum spoilers, but that'll be fun to see Arkfeld as a Monstie. And we have Arkfeld Mane as the monster hair. We also have Mizu Braid, which isn't surprising because Mizu's been pretty much a staple since it came out. And so Mizu's not going to be surprising to see Mizu again. We also have Lunagaron Fade, which is pretty cool. This would insinuate that we get a Lunagaron as a Monstie, and that's super exciting. I do like Lunagaron a lot. Following that, we have Garangolm Nest, which makes sense because we also have Malzeno Bob. Those 3 are kind of the Malzeno, Lunagaron, and Garangolm. They're kind of the main trio of Rise and Sunbreak, and so it makes sense that we would get all 3 if we have one. We also have Gosharagy, which is pretty cool. I know Goshorog is a lot of people's favorites. Following that, we have one called Hellfire Tail, and I don't really know what that entails, because that could be a lot of different things, but it kind of sounds like a Glavenus, which we already know Glavenus is in the game, so that's not too surprising if that's what it is. Following that, we have Octolock's Princess, which I'm hoping is Newdra, because Newdra is like my 3rd favorite monster in the entire franchise. It's definitely my favorite monster in Wilds, and so if I get a Newdra, I will be very, very happy. So that is the hope with that. And lastly, we have Espina Spikes. This is exciting because I would love to have Espinas as a Monstie. That would be very, very cool. So I'm hoping that these monster hairs are telling of what kind of Monsties we can expect to see when the game fully releases, but we will just have to see. And that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about with this video. Let me know what your thoughts are. I think this game is going to be great. I think it's going to be a sleeper game of the year. I can't lie. It's unfortunately going to get beat out by like Expedition 34 or some stupid thing like that, but this game is going to be incredible, and I cannot wait for March 12th. But I'll probably make another video down the line, maybe some other things that I noticed or some other guides, something like that. I don't know. But let me know what your thoughts are on Stories 3 if you've played it. If not, are you excited for it? And otherwise, I will catch you all later.